I swear on this wide frontier sky, no man will lay claim to her but me. The depot baked in Arizona sun, dust swirling around a fat bride left standing with her trunk. Men spat tobacco, women whispered, shame heavy as iron. Then boots thundered. A giant cowboy stepped from the glare, shadow stretching across the boards. He lifted her trunk like straw and spoke one word that silenced all. Stay with me because the end of this story will break your heart if you look away. The desert afternoon burned down on Copper Hollow Depot, 1885. Dust pressed into every crack, coating the boards in a pale crust. A telegraph wire hummed faintly in the heat. Horses tied at the rail twitched, stomping flies, their sweat running dark on flanks. Freight wagons rattled past with iron hoops groaning, drivers spitting tobacco into the dirt. The town stretched lean from the depot, a single street lined with false front buildings, the Silver Star Saloon with peeling paint, the mercantile stacked with barrels of flour and coffee, the blacksmith shop ringing iron against iron. A church bell tolled once in the distance, then fell quiet. Even the bell seemed reluctant to break the stillness. Clara May stepped down from the train car, her boots sinking into the powdery dust. Her navy traveling dress sagged with wrinkles, damp from 3 days of cramped benches. In her left hand she gripped a battered trunk, patched leather with brass corners dulled by years of use. In her right she clutched a folded letter, edges softened from being read too many times. The letter carried her ruin. Handed to her by the station master with a muttered, "Sorry, ma'am." It was short, final. James Walton, cattleman of some local wealth, had looked once at the bride sent from Boston and declared her unfit. Too heavy, too outspoken, too much. At the bottom, his thumb had smeared a violet blot of ledger ink across his name, a careless stain that seemed more brutal than the words. The train groaned, hissed, and pulled away, its smoke dissolving in hard light. The platform boards creaked under Clara's weight as she stood, abandoned cargo. The station master retreated into his booth, eager to avoid her eyes. A hush spread. 2 bonneted women slowed, whispering behind gloved hands. A cowhand leaned against the post, chewing dried beef, his gaze open and cruel. Children carrying a basket of apples stopped giggling, then scurried off when their mother hissed. Even silence became accusation. Clara could feel the town drawing tight around her, waiting for her to break. Her throat closed. She forced her chin higher, lips set. She would not give them tears. Not here. Not for them. She folded the letter sharply, too sharply. It slipped, skated across the boards, and landed at the boots of the cowhand. He nudged it with his toe, smirked, and walked off. Clara bent quickly, the paper hot against her palm. The ink smear bled through, marking her skin like a bruise. She pressed it against her bodice, holding it as if it were shield, though it was only shame. From the open doors of the Silver Star Saloon came a crash, laughter, then a hush. Men leaned out to see. A piano key rang sour. The rumor would spread before dusk. Walton's mail-order bride returned like spoiled meat. Clara looked to Main Street. A sign above the mercantile offered flour at $4 a sack, sugar 6. Chickens scattered across ruts, chased by ragged boys. The blacksmith's hammer clanged, sparks bright against shadow. Life continued, practical and harsh. She had crossed the continent to be part of it. Yet here she stood, cast aside, worth less than a barrel of flour. Heat shimmered beyond the far end of town. A rider appeared, moving slow. Dust curled around his horse's legs. Clara shaded her eyes. He sat enormous, shoulders squared like a gate, chest broad beneath a faded blue shirt. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed half his face. The horse, a strong roan, seemed small beneath him. He swung down. Boots struck the boards with a thud that shook the planks. The platform seemed to tilt under his bulk. He walked forward, each step steady, and people edged aside without realizing. Names whispered: Hank Carter, the giant from Dry Creek Valley, owner of the Double C Ranch. Stories said he had once lifted a steer, had once carried 2 wounded men out of a canyon alone. Some claimed he had buried a wife and child up on the ridge, and since then had kept silent as stone. He stopped before Clara. Storm-gray eyes studied her. No mockery, no pity, just assessment. He glanced at the trunk at her feet. Brass corners dull, leather worn. Then his gaze slid to the letter clenched against her chest. The purple stain had bled through fabric, marking her like brand. The depot quieted. Even the horses froze, ears flicking. Clara's breath came sharp. She braced for laughter, insult, dismissal. Instead, Hank Carter bent, gripped the trunk's handle, and lifted. With one hand, he swung it up, leather straps groaning. He straightened, sun blazing behind his shoulders, the weight nothing to him. Gasps rippled. "Mine," he said, voice low, rough, but carrying clear. The station master startled, pushing open his booth. "Mr. Carter?" Hank ignored him. He turned, facing this crowd, then looked back at Clara. His jaw set. Dust spun in the heat between them. "My wife," Hank Carter said. The words cut sharper than a pistol crack. The saloon went silent. Somewhere glass shattered on the floor. Clara's knees trembled. The ink smear throbbed purple on her skin. She stared at the giant cowboy, her trunk hanging like straw in his hand. He waited, calm, as if daring her to deny or accept. Every eye on the platform burned into her. Bonneted women drew in quick breaths. The cowhand who had mocked her spat in the dirt, eyes narrowed. One man at the hitching rail muttered, "Devil take her," and turned away. The air thickened, charged with judgment and something darker. The sun dropped lower, stretching long shadows across the depot. Clara gripped the letter until her knuckles whitened. A question rose like thunder inside her chest. Had she just been saved or claimed? And all around them, the town held its breath. The giant cowboy lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing and declared, "My wife." A gasp. A spit silence. The word thundered over the platform, scattering laughter into hush. From the saloon doorway, men leaned forward, eyes narrow. 2 bonneted women clutched each other, whispering sharp. The cowhand who had mocked Clara May spat brown juice into dust, lips curling. The station master froze, hat twisting in his hands. Even the children at the mercantile corner stopped chewing apples, juice dripping from small chins. Clara could not breathe. Her chest burned as if the desert sun had lodged inside her ribs. Hank Carter stood tall, trunk balanced easy against his hip, storm-gray eyes calm. His presence filled the depot until no one else seemed real. He reached his free hand toward her, palm broad, lined with rope scars, calloused thick. It hung in the air, waiting. Clara's fingers clenched around the letter at her bodice, the violet stain pressing against her skin like bruise. To take that hand was to step under his shadow. To refuse was to shatter before every gaze. She placed her hand in his. His grip closed firm, steady, no cruelty. He guided her down the steps. The crowd parted without knowing, like cattle before a storm. "She's with me," Hank said. That ended it. The station master bowed his head. Murmurs died. On the street his wagon waited, 2 bays stamping restless hooves. Harness creaked, brass buckles flashing. In the bed lay rope coils, a salt crate chalked $2.40, and feed sacks patched with burlap. Clara's eyes snagged on the price, more than she owned in her purse. Hank swung her trunk up, wood thudding. Then he turned, hand open again. Clara climbed, skirts brushing wheel spokes, bonnet slipping. She settled on the high seat, wood hot under her palms. Hank climbed beside her, bulk shifting the wagon. He flicked reins. The bays lunged forward. Main Street unrolled. The silver stars' swinging doors creaked. Men stared from shadows, poker hands forgotten. At the mercantile, Widow Abernathy paused mid-sail, flour sack cradled in arms, lips parted. Franklin Hargrave, banker, stood on his porch, watch chain glinting, eyes sharp with calculation. Whispers clung like burrs. Walton's reject. Carter's folly. She'll eat him dry. Clara sat rigid, chin high. Her cheeks flamed, but she would not bend. Hank said nothing. His hat brim cut shadow across his face, jaw locked, hands steady on reins. At the edge of town, the road widened to desert. Mesquite scattered low, cactus thorns catching light. Red buttes rose jagged on horizon. Overhead, buzzards turned lazy circles. The wagon rattled hard. Dust rose in choking veils. Clara gripped her letter tighter, fingers numb. "You hold it close," Hank said at last. She started. "It is mine, but it owns you if you clutch it so." Her lips parted. No sound. She pressed the paper harder, as if it could anchor her. Silence stretched. Wheels ground through ruts. They passed a dry creek bed, stones bleached bone white. A weathered sign lounged there, riddled with bullet holes. Water rights disputed. Bullet holes. Fresh. Hank's eyes flicked, then back to reins. Clara shivered though the heat scalded. A warning slept in that sign, waiting to rise. She shifted on the seat, skirts sticking to her legs. The land rolled wider. Cattle specks moved under haze. Fences leaned in zigzags, wire glinting. A crow cawed once, harsh, then vanished. At a rise, Hank slowed the team. Below spread a valley, scorched yet stubborn. Corrals, a barn roof sagging, a squat log house with stone chimney. Over the gate, rough boards carved CC. Double C Ranch. Clara caught her breath. She had expected boarding house, one night's roof. Instead, a homestead raw, lonely, heavy with work. Hank's voice rumbled. 5 miles east. Land's mine. Cattle 2 flat words, no pride. Clara's pulse hammered. "Why bring me here?" "You need roof." "I need hands. Simple a roof." Hands, simple. Words like bars. The wagon rolled through the gate. Chickens flurried. A dog barked once, slunk away. The house loomed, dark logs, windows bare. No flowers, no lace, no trace of woman. Only stone and silence. Hank stopped the team. Climbed down, boots thudded. He swung the trunk to his shoulder as if it were cloth. He looked up at her. Hat brim shadowed his gaze, but his mouth held something between grim and patient. "This house hasn't known a woman's touch in years." The words hung heavy. Clara's throat tightened. She sat frozen, staring at the dark doorway. Dust filmed the porch boards, spiderwebs silver in eaves. Inside waited only shadow. Her mind reeled. Saved or claimed. The letter crinkled, stain pressing deeper. She imagined it spreading, binding her to this land. Hank shifted the trunk higher. He turned toward the porch. His shoulders blocked the sun, casting her in shade. "Come down." Invitation. Command. Both. Behind her, the road shimmered, empty, stretching back to Copper Hollow. Ahead, the log house opened like a mouth. Clara drew a breath sharp as knives. Boots creaked as she moved. She placed her hand on the seat, preparing to climb, pulse hammering. Not an inn, not a bed for a night. A home, his. Clara looked at the dark doorway of Double C and realized this was not lodging for a night. This was his home. Her boots struck dirt as she climbed down, skirts brushing dust. The air smelled of old smoke, sweat, and dry wood. Hank Carter stood ahead, trunk hoisted easy on one shoulder, filling the porch with shadow. He nudged the door open with his boot. Hinges groaned. Inside waited silence. Clara followed, bonnet trembling on her head. Her eyes adjusted slow. The room stretched wide but barren. A stone fireplace gaped cold. A rough table scarred by knives squatted at center. 3 chairs mismatched around it. On the wall hung a pair of antlers, dusty, cobweb clinging. The floorboards showed wear, grooves from heavy boots. No curtains, no lace. No flowers, only function. Hank set the trunk down with a hollow thump. He straightened, hat still shadowing his eyes. "This is it," he said. The words dropped flat. No apology, no pride. Clara scanned the room. Against the mantel leaned a rifle long as her arm, stock polished from years of grip. Beside it, a pistol holster hung from a nail. Above, a frame rested crooked. She stepped closer, squinting. Inside the cracked glass, a faded photograph. Woman's face barely visible. a child's hand reaching. The corner of the frame was broken, wood splintered. Dust filmed it thick. Her chest tightened. She looked back. Hank's gaze tracked her, unreadable. She forced her voice steady. "You live alone?" "Pedro works cattle. Sleeps in bunkhouse. Otherwise, just me," the words settled heavy. Clara brushed the photograph with her glove. Dust smeared gray. She turned away quick, unwilling to trespass further. Hank walked to a door in the rear. He pushed it open, revealing a hall. "Kitchen through there. 2 rooms down. Mine's at the end. Others been storage. You can use it." He led her down the short hall. The first door opened to a cramped space filled with crates, a saddle with cracked leather, blankets piled careless. Against one wall stood a narrow bed frame, quilt faded, unused. Hank lifted her trunk into the room, setting it at the foot of the bed. "I'll clear the rest later." Clara placed her hand on the quilt. Dust rose. She nodded, voice low. "It will do." For a moment, Hank lingered in the doorway, shoulders filling it. He touched his hat brim. "Water pumps out back. Outhouse 50 yards. I've got chores." He hesitated, then added, "If you need, holler." Then he left. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. Springs groaned under her weight. She pressed her face into her hands. Heat from the journey clung to her skin, sweat beading. Through the thin wall, she heard Hank's boots tread heavy, fading toward the yard. Then only silence. She lifted her head. The storage room crowded close, smelling of leather, hay dust, and iron. In her lap, her hands trembled. She opened the trunk. Inside, 3 dresses, a shawl, sturdy boots, and a small pouch with coins. On top lay her mother's silver hairbrush, tarnished. She touched it gentle, as if her mother's hand still lingered there. Beneath, wrapped in cloth, a daguerreotype. Her family 5 years earlier, lined faces. Her father's tailoring shears clutched firm. She stared long, then placed it on the chest of drawers. The house creaked in wind. A shutter banged once, then stilled. Clara rose, smoothing her dress. She stepped back to the main room, empty still. She crossed to the hearth, ran her fingers over stone cool with neglect. In the silence, each creak of the floor shouted. At the window she looked out. Beyond stretched corral, barn leaning, fields brown. Hank moved across the yard, tall as the gateposts, shoulders glinting with sweat. He led the bays to water, his motions steady, economical. A man fused to land, to work, to solitude. Clara turned away. On the table lay a knife, blade nicked, hilt worn. Beside it, a scrap of paper covered with figures, feed costs and cattle tallies. She lifted it, scanning lines of numbers. Every column tight, every digit pressed hard into paper. A man who measured everything. The door banged. Clara startled. Hank entered, wiping hands on rag. His eyes flicked to her holding the scrap. She set it down quick. He studied her a long beat, then grunted. "Supper at 6. Nothing fancy. Beans, maybe bacon if Pedro brings it." Clara's lips parted. "I can cook." His brow lifted. "Travel tired. I'd rather be useful." For the first time, a corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, but near. He nodded once. She stepped toward the kitchen. The room was plain, shelves lined with jars, a cast-iron stove, a basin dry. She opened the cupboard. Flour, beans, coffee, onions sprouting green. Enough for a meal. She lit the lamp, flame flickering, casting shadows. By evening, beans simmered, bread baking heavy in the stove. Clara moved slow, cautious yet determined. When the door opened again, Pedro entered, small, wiry man, hair gray at the temples, face carved by sun. He paused, eyes darting from Clara to Hank. "This is Miss May," Hank said simply. "She'll be staying." Pedro's gaze softened. He tipped his hat. "Bienvenida, señora." Clara dipped her head. "Thank you." They ate in near silence. Only scrape of spoons, crack of firewood. Clara sat stiff, every movement watched. Yet no mockery came. Pedro's eyes held quiet respect. Hank's expression stayed carved stone. Afterward, Hank stood. Long day. Tomorrow, chores. Rest, he left for his room, boots thudding. Pedro carried his plate, offered Clara a small nod, then slipped out. Alone, Clara washed dishes in basin. Water cooled her hands, grounding her. She dried them on her skirt, then turned. Her gaze drifted back to the photograph above the fireplace. Woman's blurred face, child's hand reaching. The cracked frame tilted, shadow cutting across it. Her chest squeezed. She whispered to empty air, "What happened here?" Wind moaned through eaves, no answer but its hollow. Clara climbed to her room, lamp in hand. She closed the door, set the flame low. She sat on the bed, quilt scratchy under her palms. Her eyes roamed the trunk, the photograph of her family, the silver hairbrush, all that was left of one life, set against the unknown of another. She lay down, body heavy, mind racing. In the silence, the house seemed to breathe. Each timber creaked, each gust whispered. Somewhere outside, Hank's boots scraped stone, then faded. Clara pressed the letter flat beneath her pillow. The violet stain burned like brand even in darkness. And in her chest, one question swelled until it filled the room. Had she walked into refuge or cage? The cracked photograph on the mantel watched her from the dark. And Clara May realized the house held more than silence. It held secrets. Sleep came slow. When it did, dreams tangled. A child's hand reaching from broken glass. Voices muttering beyond walls. Dawn broke harsh. Rooster crowed, hoarse and angry. Clara stirred, dress wrinkled, hair falling from pins. She splashed her face at the pump out back, water biting cold, then returned inside. Hank was already gone, his boots and hat missing from the peg. Only Pedro moved about, frying bacon in the iron pan, humming in Spanish. He slid her a nod, nothing more. Clara sat stiff at the table, fingers clasped. The photograph loomed across the room. She ate little, bread dry in her mouth. By mid-morning, Hank returned, leading 2 calves on rope. Dust filmed his shirt. Sweat dampened his hair. He drank from the basin, wiped his mouth with his sleeve. His eyes flicked to Clara. "Town," he said. "Need supplies." Her chest tightened. "You expect me to—" He cut her short. "Best they see you. Whispers worse if you hide." So she gathered her bonnet, gloves, shawl. The wagon waited, horses restless. They rode in silence, road rattling beneath wheels. Clara's hands clutched her skirts. The depot appeared, sun glaring on tin roof. Main Street spread, alive with trade. Men hauling sacks, women bartering for cloth. Children darting. Hank drew rein before the mercantile. He climbed down, then turned, offering his hand. Clara froze. Dozens of eyes already on her. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Still, she placed her gloved hand in his. He helped her down, steady, unhurried. Whispers rose like wind through dry grass. "That's her. Walton's cast-off. Look at her, near bursting the seams." Clara lifted her chin, spine rigid. She would not bend. Inside the mercantile, air smelled of leather and flour. Mr. Simmons, spectacles glinting, looked up. His brows rose. "Mr. Carter," he said slow. "And your wife?" Hank's voice came solid. "Aye, Mrs. Carter." The title struck like a gunshot. Clara's heart lurched. She glanced at Hank. But his eyes stayed on Simmons, steady, unflinching. Simmons cleared his throat, fussed with ledger. "What'll it be today?" Hank listed flour, beans, coffee, nails, seed. Clara found herself adding quietly, "Curtain cloth, if you please." "Blue calico," her voice quavered but held. Simmons scribbled, avoiding her gaze. "That'll be $12 all told." Clara's purse felt light in her hand. She reached, then stopped as Hank laid coins on the counter without a glance at her. He gathered sacks as if nothing unusual had passed. Outside, the street seemed louder. Men lounged near the saloon doors, spurs jingling. One called out, voice sharp, "Hey, Carter, didn't know you were desperate enough to take Walton's leavings." Laughter cracked. Clara stiffened, nails biting her palms. She waited for Hank to flare, to fight. Instead, he set the flour sack on the wagon bed, turned slow, and fixed the speaker with storm-gray eyes. "Say it again," he rumbled. The man faltered, swallowed, looked away. Laughter died. Hank climbed onto the wagon, reins in hand. "Up," he told Clara. She obeyed, skirts swishing, chin still high. The wagon rolled on. Eyes followed, but no one dared another word. At the church corner, Sheriff Dalton tipped his hat. His eyes held something unreadable, not unfriendly, but not blind. Clara met his gaze a moment, then looked away. The road back seemed longer. Dust clung to her bonnet. Sun burned her neck. Hank said nothing. His silence pressed heavier than words. When the ranch gate came into view, Clara breathed easier. She had survived the town, yet the whispers clung like burrs, lodged under her skin. That night, after beans and bread, she sat near the hearth, sewing curtain hems by lamplight. Hank sat across, mending a bridle, his hands moving sure. Pedro smoked on the porch, faint notes of his song drifting in. Clara glanced at the mantel. The cracked photograph gleamed faint under flame. She swallowed hard. "That picture." Hank's head lifted. His eyes cut sharp. Clara faltered. "Was she your wife?" Silence filled the room. Fire popped. Hank set the bridle aside, rose, and carried it to the wall. He did not answer. He left the room, boots heavy on boards. Clara stared after him, heart hammering. The photograph stared back, broken glass catching light. Outside, the dog barked sudden, sharp. Pedro's voice called low in Spanish. Hoofbeats echoed faint beyond the ridge. Clara moved to the window, lamp raised. Out in the dark, shapes shifted, 2, maybe 3 riders passing slow, keeping distance. Her breath caught. She turned as Hank entered again, rifle in hand. He moved past her, eyes narrowed, stepping onto the porch. "Stay inside," he said. Clara clutched the curtain hem in her fist. From the porch came Hank's low voice, carrying into night. "You got business. Make it plain." No answer. Only hoofbeats fading into dark. Hank stood long on the porch, rifle ready, until silence returned. Then he came in, set the gun by the hearth, and met Clara's eyes. "Town whispers are nothing. Real trouble rides after dark." She swallowed, throat dry. The lamp flame trembled. Clara May realized Copper Hollow's whispers were only the beginning. The real danger circled outside, waiting for night. The riders had faded into dark, but unease lingered. Hank set his rifle against the mantel, jaw clenched. Pedro closed the porch door softly, his face shadowed, eyes alert. Clara sat stiff at the table, needle frozen in half-stitched cloth. The cracked photograph glimmered above the hearth. Glass fractured like a warning. Silence stretched. Then Hank said, "Bolt the door." Pedro obeyed. Clara rose, slid the heavy bar across. The sound thudded final. She looked at Hank. He stood broad in lamplight, shirt damp with sweat, face cut in shadow. "Rustlers?" she asked. "Maybe, or worse. Folks sniffing for weakness." She swallowed. Her fingers trembled against the wood. "They knew you. They know the double C water rights. Land." His voice dropped, almost a growl. "And they know I don't scare." The lamp hissed. Outside, coyotes yipped. Clara pressed her shawl close. Hours passed slow. Wind moaned through eaves. Hank sat by the door, rifle across his knees. Pedro kept watch at the back window. Clara lay on the narrow bed in the storage room, but sleep would not come. Each creak of the house jolted her. At last, exhaustion dragged her under. She woke to shouts. The night ripped with hoofbeats, dogs barking wild. She stumbled from the bed, heart racing. A gunshot cracked outside, sharp as lightning. Another answered, closer. Clara reached the hall as Hank shoved the door open, rifle blasting fire into dark. Figures wheeled on horseback, shouting curses. One fired back. Glass shattered across the main room, shards skittering over boards. "Down!" Hank barked. He fired again, pump steady. Pedro shot from the rear window, his musket booming. Horses screamed, hooves thundered retreat. Dust and smoke filled the night. Then silence broken only by groaning. Clara's eyes widened. Hank leaned heavy against the doorframe, rifle slipping from his grasp. A dark stain spread across his sleeve, glistening under lamplight. She rushed forward. "You're hit!" "Just a graze," he muttered, teeth gritted. But when he staggered, knees buckling, she caught his arm. Warm blood slicked her fingers. "Sit now," she ordered, surprising even herself. Hank let her guide him to the table. He sank onto the chair, breath harsh. Pedro hovered near, face grim. "Fetch water, rags," Clara commanded. Pedro hurried. Clara tore her shawl into strips, hands shaking but determined. She pressed cloth to the wound, crimson soaking fast. Hank flinched. "No need. Be quiet," she snapped, "or bleed to death." His storm-gray eyes fixed on her, startled. Then he obeyed. She peeled the torn sleeve back. A bullet had carved a furrow across his upper arm, deep but not fatal. She cleaned it with trembling fingers, water stinging. Hank hissed between teeth but did not pull away. Pedro handed a needle. "Boil first," Clara said. He did while she pressed cloth firm. When ready, she threaded the needle with steadying breath. "Hold still." Hank grunted. "Do it." Her stitches were clumsy but strong. Each pass bit his flesh, each knot tied with sweat on her brow. At last she tied the final knot, bound it with fresh cloth. Her hands ached, spotted red. She sat back, breath ragged. "There. You'll live." Hank flexed fingers, winced. Then, to her shock, he said softly, "Thank you." Clara froze. His voice held no command, no iron. Only weight of gratitude. She turned away quick, scrubbing her hands in the basin. Her heart pounded, heat rising to her cheeks. Pedro muttered, "They'll come again." Hank nodded, jaw tight. "Testing fences. Tomorrow, tracks will tell who." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. The reality sank. She had stepped into a war, not hers. Yet when Hank winced, she felt the pull of duty, of something deeper. Dawn broke pale. The yard showed hoof prints churned into dirt, fence posts splintered, chicken coop overturned. Hank stood stiff, arm bandaged, surveying. Clara lingered behind, shawl drawn tight. "Why do they come?" she asked. Hank's gaze swept horizon. "Because land feeds cattle. Cattle feed men. And men get greedy," she pressed lips thin. "And me? What am I in this?" His eyes met hers. "You chose to ride with me. Now you stand in it too." The words struck cold, yet she knew they were true. That evening, Clara cooked beans with onion, hands moving automatic. Hank sat at table, arm bound, silent but watchful. Pedro patched fence outside. The house felt smaller, walls holding in the echo of gunfire. Clara set bowls down, met Hank's eyes. "You bleed, I stitch. That makes me more than baggage." His mouth twitched, the faintest shadow of respect. They ate in silence, spoons scraping. Wind pressed against shutters. From the mantel, the cracked photograph gleamed, as if bearing witness. Later, as Clara washed dishes, Hank lingered in the doorway, his voice low. "I don't take help easy. But last night, you held me together." Her hands stilled in the water. She did not look back. "I did what needed doing." Silence stretched. Then boots creaked as he walked away. Clara dried her hands, heart tumbling. She glanced at the photograph, its broken glass slicing light. Secrets lived here, but so did wounds, and not all were old. Outside, coyotes yipped. Horses stirred uneasy. Clara carried her lamp to her room, set it on the chest of drawers. She lay down, but sleep evaded. Each creak of the house brought the night back. The gunfire, the blood, the weight of Hank's arm heavy under her hands. She closed her eyes, but the thought burned. She had stitched herself into this life as surely as she stitched his flesh. Clara May knew the rustlers would return, and next time, they would not aim to wound, but to claim. That thought shadowed her as dawn spilled across Double C. Chickens scattered nervously, wings flapping, still restless from the night of gunfire. The yard smelled of gunpowder and blood, Hank's sleeve drying stiff on the clothesline where Clara had scrubbed it. Pedro moved along the fence line, hammer ringing as he patched splintered posts. Hank saddled his bay gelding with one hand, bandaged arm stiff, jaw clenched. Clara stood at the kitchen window, kneading dough, her sleeves rolled high. The rhythm of her hands calmed her. Still, every strike of Pedro's hammer outside sounded like warning, every creak of saddle leather like omen. By noon, bread cooled on the sill. Hank and Pedro worked cattle, dust rising in clouds. Clara stepped into the yard, shawl tied against sun. She walked past the coop, past the corral, toward a patch behind the house. The ground there lay bare, fenced crudely, weeds creeping. She crouched, tugged a weed loose. Roots gave with a snap, soil dry as bone. She brushed dirt from her palms. The plot smelled faintly of rot, old neglect. Yet she saw potential, a place for life to root, for something other than bullets and fear. Her mother's voice echoed Boston garden rows of beans, careful hands teaching her. Clara straightened, resolve settling. She returned inside, rummaged through her trunk, pulling out a small packet of seeds tucked within her shawl. Radish, lettuce, beans. She carried them to the patch. The sun blazed. Sweat streaked her face. She knelt, pressing seeds into furrows scratched with her spoon. She covered them gently, patting earth. Each seed felt defiant. A shadow fell. Clara stiffened. She turned. Pedro stood at the fence, hat pushed back, rag in hand, his face unreadable. "Senor Carter never lets anyone touch this ground," he said softly. Clara's heart jolted. "Why?" Pedro shrugged, eyes dark. It was hers. His mujer before. She planted roses here. Clara looked at the soil again, chest tight. There are no roses now. Died. Like she did. Pedro's gaze lingered on her. Then he shook his head. "Still, you plant." "Yes," Clara whispered. "I plant." Pedro's mouth twitched, something like respect. He tipped his hat and walked away. Clara remained, pressing the last seeds into soil. Her hands trembled. She had trespassed on ghost ground. Yet she did not stop. Later, as dusk fell, Hank returned. Dust filmed his face. Sweat streaked his shirt. He tied the gelding, wiped his brow with his bandaged arm. Then his eyes fell on the patch. He froze. Clara straightened, dirt on her skirts, hair damp under her bonnet. "I planted," she said simply. His jaw worked. Storm-gray eyes narrowed. For a long beat, silence held. Wind whispered through dry grass. At last, Hank's voice came low. "Those seeds, you put them in her soil." Clara's throat tightened. "It is soil, nothing more. Life belongs there again." His chest rose, fell. Then, unexpected, his shoulders eased. He nodded once, curt. "So be it." Clara blinked. She had braced for anger. Instead, he let her be. Relief swelled, edged with something else, a crack in his iron silence. That night she cooked stew with onions, bread fresh. At the table, Pedro ate hearty, murmuring thanks. Hank sat stiff, spoon in his left hand, bandage stark. He ate in silence, but his eyes drifted once toward the window, toward the patch behind the house. Clara noticed. She tucked the knowledge close. After supper, Pedro retired to bunkhouse. Hank lingered, mending tack with one hand, clumsy but persistent. Clara sewed curtains at the table, lamplight warm. The silence between them was no longer void. It held weight, unspoken. At length Hank said, "Rustlers won't stop." Clara set down her needle. "Then why stay?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because land is mine. Soil remembers who works it. You saw that today," Clara swallowed. "And if they take it? Then we take it back." His voice carried iron, no doubt. She met his gaze, chest trembling. You think I belong in that fight? He did not answer, but his eyes said enough. Later, alone in her narrow bed, Clara lay awake. Wind moaned across shingles. Coyotes yipped far. She thought of seeds under soil, sleeping, waiting. Would they sprout under such sky? Could anything grow where death circled? She pressed the letter flat under her pillow. The violet stain still bled, yet her fingers now smelled of earth. Morning came hot. Clara rose early, checked the patch. Nothing yet, only soil cracked dry. She carried water in pail, poured carefully, darkening furrows. Drops glistened like hope. Behind her, boots crunched. She turned. Hank stood, arms folded, bandage fresh. He watched, silent. Then he stepped closer, took the pail, finished the watering himself. Clara stared, throat tight. He set the pail down, met her eyes. No words, only that silent act. The crack in him widened, just enough for her to glimpse the man beyond. That evening, Clara sat by the hearth, book open. Hank repaired saddle straps. Pedro smoked outside. The cracked photograph above the mantel glimmered. Clara lifted her eyes to Hank. She planted roses. He froze. Leather strap in his hand, motion halted. His jaw clenched. Clara pressed on, gentle. I planted beans. Lettuce, radish, not roses. That is different. His gaze burned into hers. Long, fierce. Then he looked away, shoulders stiff. Clara's chest ached, but she held his silence like a seed itself planted, waiting. When she climbed to bed, stars burned white over the valley. Rustlers had not returned, but hoofprints still scarred the earth near the fence line. She knew danger would circle again. Yet in the soil behind the house, hope had been buried, fragile and stubborn. Clara May touched her dirt-stained hands and realized she had planted more than seeds. She had sown herself into Double C's fate. Days passed. She tended the patch each dawn, pouring water, pulling weeds. Shoots broke soil thin, green, trembling in dry wind, yet alive. Each sprout felt like a promise she dared not voice. Hank's eyes followed sometimes, quiet, unreadable. Pedro hummed while mending fence, watching her with a half-smile that seemed to say, "You belong here now." Still, the memory of hoofbeats haunted nights. Twice the dog barked at shadows. Hank patrolled the yard with rifle across his arm, but no shots came. Clara lay awake, heart racing, until the rooster's cry ended dread. One evening, as she kneaded dough, Hank spoke from the table. Town's holding Founder's Day. Food, music, dance. Clara froze. Her fingers pressed hard into flour. You mean for us to go? He looked up, storm-gray eyes steady. Best they see you again. Not in whispers. In light, her pulse quickened. I have nothing to wear. You have hands. His voice softened. Needle, cloth. You'll manage, so she did. By lamplight, Clara cut blue calico, stitching seams into a dress plain but strong. She sewed lace edging from scraps, fingers pricked raw. Each stitch steadied her. When finished, she tried it on alone, bonnet off, hair pinned neat. The mirror showed not the woman abandoned at the depot, but one reshaped by soil and labor. Festival day came bright. Hank hitched bays to the wagon, Pedro staying behind to guard the ranch. Clara climbed aboard, calico hem brushing dust. The ride rattled her bones, but her chin stayed high. Copper Hollow bustled. Lanterns strung across Main Street swayed. Women carried pies, men stacked benches, children darted. Music tuned in the square fiddle squeaks, guitar chords. Hank reined before the saloon. He climbed down, offered his hand. Clara took it, breath held. Whispers rippled, but this time she heard awe beneath scorn. Inside the square, tables groaned with food. Beans, pies, roasted pork. Women eyed Clara, their stares sharp as needles. She lifted her chin, shoulders back. Mrs. Abernathy bustled over, cheeks flushed. So glad you came, dear. Walton never knew quality. Her words rang loud enough for others to hear. Clara flushed, murmured thanks. Music struck a fiddle's lively tune. Couples stepped onto the makeshift floor. Lantern light shimmered. Clara stood aside, hands folded. Then Hank appeared at her shoulder. "Dance," he said simply. She blinked. "I don't—" "Neither do I." His mouth twitched. He held out his hand. Eyes turned as she laid her hand in his. He led her among the couples. His steps were heavy, awkward but steady. She stumbled once, then found rhythm. They moved slow, deliberate, lantern glow washing their faces. Whispers swelled. "Carter's wife. Never thought he'd—" "She holds her own. Look." Clara's cheeks flamed, but she kept her chin high. She let herself lean, just slightly, into his steady arm. For the first time since Boston, she felt not spectacle, but woman. Music slowed. Hank's hand lingered at her waist. His eyes met hers, storm gray softening. Her breath caught. Then a voice cut harsh. "There she is!" The fiddle squealed wrong. Dancers froze. Lantern shadows wavered. From the edge of the crowd strode James Walton. Vest fine but dusted. Boots polished. Face flushed. Gasps swept. Women clutched children. Men drew back. Walton's eyes blazed as he pointed. "That woman was meant to be mine." She ran before the ink dried. Clara stiffened. Every muscle taut. Hank's arm tensed, pulling her slightly behind him. His voice rumbled steady. "You sent her back." She chose where to stand. Walton sneered. "Chose? You stole her, paraded her." The crowd murmured, tension thick. Sheriff Dalton shifted near, hand on holster, gaze sharp. Clara's pulse thundered. The letter pressed in her bodice. Violet stain ghosting her skin. She drew a breath. Her voice rang clear. "Mr. Walton, you rejected me before all. You do not own me now." The square hushed. Walton's jaw clenched. His hand twitched near his coat. Clara's heart stopped. Would he draw? Hank stepped forward, body a wall. Storm gray eyes burned. "You'll not touch her!" The air quivered, lanterns swaying. Walton's hand slid toward his pistol, and the festival crowd held its breath, waiting for blood under lantern light. The fiddle clattered silent. Mothers clutched children close. Men shifted, boots grinding dust. Sheriff Dalton stepped forward, palm hovering above his holster. The lantern swung, throwing jagged shadows across Walton's face flushed, eyes bloodshot, lips twisted with fury. Hank stood square, one arm shielding Clara May, storm gray eyes locked on the man before him. The crowd's whispers buzzed like hornets. Walton sneered. "You think you can take what's mine, Carter?" Hank's voice came low, steady as stone. "She was never yours. You gave her up." Clara's heart hammered. Her bodice pressed tight where the crumpled letter hid the very proof of his betrayal. Fingers trembled, but resolve hardened. She would not let Hank fight her battle alone. She stepped from behind him. Gasps rippled. Hank reached, but she shook her head. Her voice carried, clear as a church bell. "James Walton, you speak of taking. But what did you take first? My pride? My hope? You sent me a letter." She pulled it from her bodice, the violet stain dark under lantern glow. The crowd leaned forward. Walton's face paled. "You wrote," Clara read, voice sharp. "Too plain. Too bold. Not what I paid for." Murmurs swelled. Women covered mouths, men shook heads. Mrs. Abernathy's cheeks burned crimson with indignation. Clara held the letter high. "This is the man who dares claim me now. A man who cast me aside with ink, then seeks to own me with a gun." Walton's jaw clenched. "You twist." "No," Clara cut him, voice fierce. "You revealed yourself. This letter is your truth." The square erupted, anger, disbelief, judgment. Sheriff Dalton's voice rang above. "Enough, Walton. You'll not shame her here." But Walton's hand clutched pistol grip. His breath came ragged, eyes wild. He barked, "She owes me passage west. She owes me obedience." The words cracked the night like another shot. Clara felt rage burn her chest. She took a step forward. "I owe you nothing. Not one word. Not one breath." The crowd cheered. Men nodded. Women straightened proud. Hank's hand brushed her back steady, silent, protective, yet letting her stand tall. Walton's fury broke. He yanked his pistol free. Gasps tore the night. Sheriff's gun flashed half-drawn. Hank moved like a storm, shoving Clara aside, chest square. But before steel struck air, a new sound split the silence. Pedro's voice from the crowd. "Drop it, Walton!" Clara's eyes darted. Pedro stood near the tables, his revolver steady, eyes burning under brim. His voice was low but cut sharp. "You pull that trigger, you'll meet the dirt faster than you can blink." The crowd froze. Walton's eyes flicked from Hank's steady glare, to Pedro's gun, to the sheriff's hand, then back to Clara's unyielding stare. Sweat dripped. His pistol trembled. Then he laughed, harsh, brittle. He slid the weapon back into its holster. "This isn't finished." The crowd exhaled as one. Mothers eased grips. Men loosened hands on belts. Sheriff Dalton stepped forward, voice iron. "You're finished for tonight." Leave Walton's eyes narrowed at Clara. "You'll regret this." He turned, boots crunching, pushing through the crowd. Dust swirled in his wake. Silence lingered. Then murmurs rose, softer now. Mrs. Abernathy clapped Clara's hand, tears glinting. "Brave girl." Clara trembled, knees weak, but her chin held high. Hank's hand rested on her shoulder, heavy, steady. Music did not return. The festival ended in murmurs, lanterns flickering uneasy. Yet beneath fear, pride sparked. Clara had spoken, and all had heard. Later in the wagon, wheels bumping ruts, Hank's silence weighed thick. Clara sat, letter crumpled in her hand, dust cold on her cheeks. At last Hank spoke. "You stood alone tonight." Clara turned, surprised. His eyes met hers, shadowed but glinting with respect. "I had to," she whispered. He nodded once, jaw set. "And you did." They rode on in silence. Stars burned fierce above. Clara clutched the letter, now a weapon rather than a wound. Back at Double C, Pedro waited by the gate. He looked at Clara, then at Hank. His nod carried unspoken words. "She belongs." Inside, Clara lit the lamp. The cracked photograph watched from mantel, but its weight felt less. For tonight, she had broken chains. Still, when she lay in bed, the letter beside her, unease crept. Walton had not surrendered. His laugh still rang. She closed her eyes. Hand pressed to dirt still under her nails from planting. She had sown seeds in soil. Now she had sown defiance in men's hearts. Both would need rain, and both would call storms. Walton had retreated into shadows. But Clara May knew he would return, not with words, but with blood. The weeks after the festival crawled thick with tension. Copper Hollow buzzed with talk. Some praised Clara's defiance. Others muttered that a woman should not shame a man in public. Hank worked the range harder, his jaw tight. Storm-gray eyes scanning horizons as though expecting hoofbeats. Pedro mended fence by day, polished his revolver by night. Clara tended sprouts behind the house. Beans climbed stakes. Lettuce leaves spread wide. Yet every rustle of wind felt like warning. Even chickens seemed uneasy, wings jittering at dusk. The cracked photograph glared from mantel, but Clara no longer shrank from it. She had her own ghosts now. One night, near moonrise, dogs barked sharp. Hooves thundered. Clara jolted from bed, dress clutched. Pedro burst in, voice low but urgent. "Riders." Hank was already strapping holster, bandaged arm, long-heeled but stiff. He thrust a rifle into Clara's hands. "Stay low." Through the shutters she saw torches flaring. 5 no, 6 riders circling yard. Walton's voice carried, harsh and slurred. "Come out, Carter! Let's settle what you stole." The men whooped, firing shots into sky. Chickens shrieked, horses reared. Clara's blood froze. Hank stepped onto porch, broad frame cut against torchlight. His voice thundered, "This land's mine." "You'll ride off now," laughter answered. Walton's figure loomed in torch glow, vest dusty, pistol gleaming. "Not before I take what's owed." His eyes flicked toward the house. Clara shivered under that gaze. Pedro slipped to her side, revolver cocked. "If shooting starts, stay down," he murmured. The riders tightened circle, dust swirling in firelight. Walton dismounted, boots crunching gravel. He stalked forward, pistol loose in hand, smirk wide. "You think a fat mail-order reject belongs here?" He jeered, voice pitched for all. "She was mine by right." Rage seared Clara's chest. Her fists clenched, letter folded deep in trunk. She opened her mouth, but Hank spoke first. "She chose," Hank said, voice iron. "That's more than you'll ever have." Walton snarled. His pistol snapped up. Time cracked open. Pedro fired first shot, streaked, splintered fence post near Walton's head. The yard erupted. Guns flared, torches hissed, horses screamed. Clara ducked behind doorway, rifle clutched, ears ringing. Smoke burned her throat. Hank's shots boomed steady, measured. Pedro darted along fence, revolver flashing. Walton's men returned fire wild, bullets shredding wood. A lantern shattered, flames licking dust until trampled out by hooves. Clara pressed cheek to floor, breath ragged. Then she saw through smoke. Walton crouched behind trough, pistol aimed not at Hank, but at Pedro's back. Her pulse thundered. She raised rifle, hands shaking. The barrel wavered, sweat dripping into her eyes. She could end him. One pull, but her finger froze. Breath shallow, vision blurred. The choice weighed like stone. Then Hank shouted, "Clara down!" A shot ripped splinters inches above her head. She gasped, body jolting back. Pedro spun, fired, clipping Walton's hat clean. Walton cursed, ducking. Chaos surged, smoke thick. And then clarity cut through Clara's fear. Her voice burst raw into night. "Enough!" It tore across yard like whip crack. The guns faltered. Even Walton froze, eyes wild, pistol still raised. The riders looked at her, at the woman in doorway, skirts torn, hair loose, rifle clutched through trembling. Her chest heaved, voice ringing. "This ends here! You will not take this house. You will not take me." Silence dropped heavy, broken only by horses snorting, flames guttering. For the first time, Walton's sneer wavered, but then he spat, voice venomous. "We'll see." Sheriff Dalton's shout rang from road. "Hold it!" Lanterns bobbed as townsmen rode up, rifles drawn. Walton cursed, shoved his pistol back, scrambled onto his horse. His men wheeled, torches scattering sparks. They thundered into dark, dust swallowing them. Clara sagged against doorframe, rifle slipping from numb hands. Hank caught it before it fell. His storm-gray eyes searched her face, fear, fury, something unspoken. Pedro holstered revolver, chest heaving. "They'll be back." Sheriff reined close, face grim. "We'll hold Walton for a night, but men like him buy freedom with coin. Guard your fences." The crowd dispersed, hoofbeats fading. Silence pressed heavy once more. Inside, Clara collapsed onto chair, hands trembling. Hank poured water, set cup before her. She drank, throat raw. He said nothing, only watched, unreadable. At last she whispered, "I couldn't pull the trigger." His eyes softened, storm easing. "You didn't need to. You stopped them another way." Her chest ached. "Did I?" "You stood," he said simply. "That's more than enough." Later, alone in bed, Clara stared at rafters. The night's echoes pounded her ears, the shots, the screams, her own cry. She had faced death and not broken. Yet Walton's shadow still loomed. Outside, wind carried the faint smell of gunpowder. The sprouts in the garden quivered in breeze, fragile but unbowed. Clara May closed her eyes, knowing Walton's retreat was no defeat. His next return would strike at the double C's very heart. Storm clouds gathered over the mountains, black bellies swollen with rain. Days grew tense. Chores hurried under uneasy skies. Even the cattle seemed restless, lowing deep, stamping dust into cracked earth. Hank worked silent, jaw set like stone. Pedro sharpened tools, checked rifles, muttering of omens. Clara felt the storm inside herself as much as above. She tended beans now tall, lettuce wide, but each gust bent stalks near breaking. Nights brought little sleep. She dreamed of hoofbeats circling, of Walton's eyes glittering. The evening it came. Thunder rolled long before rain. Wind slammed shutters. Chickens screeched, scattering. Hank drove horses into barn. Pedro wrestling gate shut. Clara carried baskets of onions inside, skirts whipping. The first fat drops spattered dust, exploding into dark circles. By night, rain lashed roof and walls. Wind howled through eaves. The house shook, lanterns flickered. Hank paced main room, storm-gray eyes turned inward. Clara watched him, heart tight. She had seen him stand against bullets calm, yet storm rattled him. When lightning split sky, he turned suddenly. "Come." She followed as he pulled cloak tight, led through sheets of rain to barn. Inside, animals shifted nervous, eyes rolling. Lantern light threw trembling shadows across beams. Hank stood by stall, water streaming his face, shoulders heaving as though with more than storm. Clara touched his sleeve. "What is it?" He stared past her, voice rough. "You've planted in soil that wasn't yours." Her chest clenched. "The garden." His eyes burned. "The graveyard." Clara froze. She had glimpsed crosses before, behind corral, but never asked. Rain roared on roof, drowning silence between. Hank's voice cracked. "Wife!" "Son, fever took them. Buried them with roses she planted." Her breath caught. The storm outside howled, but this revelation thundered louder. He leaned heavy on stall rail, fists white. "I couldn't save them. Couldn't keep land alive when drought came. Couldn't keep them alive when sickness struck. That soil you touched," his voice broke, "was hers." Clara's eyes stung. She stepped closer, hand trembling. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring them back." His voice was jagged. "You should run, Clara. Before land takes you to," the words cut deep. She pictured the depot, letters stained violet. Her journey west had been flight, rejection, shame. And here stood a man offering truth so raw it shook her. Lightning flared, illuminating his face creases carved by grief, eyes storming. He looked less giant than broken. Clara's chest heaved. She reached, laid her hand firm on his arm. He flinched, but she did not withdraw. "I won't run." His gaze snapped to her. "You don't know what this land does." "I do," she said, voice low but steady. "It tests. It breaks. But it also grows." She thought of beans pushing through soil, fragile but stubborn. "I choose to stay." Silence crashed heavy. Rain drummed, wind moaned. Hank's chest rose, fell. Then his shoulders sagged. For the first time, he did not hold weight alone. Clara stepped closer, arms wrapping him. He stiffened, then yielded, head lowering against her hair. His breath shuddered, body trembling like a tree in storm. She held tight, not out of pity but out of will. Minutes passed, storm raging. At last he pulled back, eyes rimmed with storm and grief both. His voice came rough. "I feared you'd see graves and flee." She shook her head. "They are part of this place." "As am I now," his throat worked. He reached to brush rain from her cheek, touch hesitant. The gesture said what words could not. Outside, thunder rolled away, rain easing to steady patter. Barn smelled of wet hay, horses calmer. Yet inside them both, storm had broken. Later, returning to house, Clara lit fresh lamp. Shadows shrank. Hank sat at table, hands clasped, silent but less burdened. Pedro dozed near hearth, rifle within reach. Clara dried her hair, glanced at cracked photograph. For once it seemed less accusing, more resigned. She whispered, "We will guard this land." Hank's eyes lifted. A long pause, then a nod. But peace lasted only that night. Morning brought news. Franklin Harrow, banker, had posted notices in town. He claimed rights to water-feeding Double C, contracts signed under drought years. Rumor said Walton was free. his bond paid by Harrow's coin. Clara read the notice sheriff brought, ink smudged by rain. Her gut clenched. This was Walton's new weapon law twisted by greed. Hank's face hardened. They'll choke the ranch till it dies. Clara pressed fingers to paper, heart hammering. Then we fight not just with rifles, but truth. She folded notice, slipped it into her apron. Walton's gun had failed, but ink might yet kill. Clara May knew her battle was no longer just survival of body, but of land, water, dignity. Outside, rain dripped from eaves, garden glistening green. Chutes stood straighter after storm, so would she. The storm had passed, but Clara May knew the next strike would come not from sky, but from men with contracts sharper than bullets. Notices plastered the copper hollow board by dawn, Harrow's clerk nailing them in rows. Ink declared Franklin Harrow sole holder of creek rights feeding Double C, signed in Hank Carter's name, witnessed by Walton. Date scrawled 3 years prior, during drought. By noon, whispers ran through town like wildfire. Carter sold under duress. Harrow owns him now. Double C will dry. Hank ripped one notice down, fists trembling. Forgery. Pedro spat dust. Law don't care if ink bleeds truth. Clara pressed fingers to the page, eyes narrowing. The handwriting, stiff and uneven, did not match Hank's careful scrawl she'd seen on ledgers. The signature crooked, letters jagged. Yet lawmen bowed to paper, not callous lines on honest hands. She gathered every scrap, stacked them in apron. That night, while Hank brooded silent by fire, she spread them across the table. The cracked photograph loomed above, but she ignored it. Candlelight flickered as she traced each line. Then her eyes caught ink blot shaped like crescent, same violet hue as Walton's rejection letter. Her heart pounded. Walton's hand had touched both. At dawn she rode with Pedro into town, shawl pinned, papers bound tight. Hank wanted to storm Harrow's office, fists first. She shook her head. Not this time. Not bullets. Truth. The town buzzed when she strode into church, doors creaking. Judge Rollins sat ready for Sunday proceedings, benches crowded. Harrow perched smug, vest gleaming, Walton beside him smirking. Hank stood near door, broad and silent shadow. Clara stepped forward. I have evidence. Gasps swept. The judge frowned. Evidence of what, Mrs. Carter? She laid both papers on pulpit, the contract and the violet-stained letter. Forgery. Same hand wrote, both eyes craned. She held them high, voice ringing. The man who cast me off with this letter signed Hank Carter's name onto this contract. Ink does not lie, whispers roared. Walton surged up, face red. Lies! Judge Rollins leaned close, squinting. Murmurs rippled, ladies nudging, men muttering. The violet blot on contract mirrored blot on letter, clear as day. Clara's chest rose, words steady. Walton wrote rejection, and he wrote this theft. Harrow hides behind it. Harrow stiffened, lips pursed. Outrageous. The paper bears witness. The town bears witness. Clara's voice cut. Every soul knows Hank Carter never signed away water keeping his cattle alive. His calloused hands, his sweat, his blood, those are his contracts. Not ink smeared by cowards. The crowd stirred, anger rising. Mrs. Abernathy stood, cheeks flushed. She speaks truth. Sheriff Dalton strode forward, hand on badge. Judge, till proof shown, no deed stands. The judge rapped gavel. The matter requires hearing. His eyes flicked at Harrow, then at Clara, wary but swayed. Clara's pulse thundered. She had held ground, forced them to listen. Walton spat, eyes venomous. You'll regret crossing me, woman. Hank stepped forward at last, storm-gray eyes blazing. His hand clamped Clara's shoulder, solid. She crossed you once already. You're still standing because law holds you back. The crowd cheered, benches rattling. Walton's face darkened, but Harrow tugged his sleeve, whispering sharp. They left stiff-backed, boots echoing. Judge Rollins set new hearing for 2 weeks. Contracts locked in strongbox. For now, water flowed still to Double C. Outside, Clara breathed ragged, sun hot on her cheeks. Hank stood beside, gaze steady. He said little, but his hand brushed hers briefly, silent thanks, silent respect. Pedro grinned, teeth flashing. Senora fights with fire. That night at Double C, Clara sat by window, garden shimmering green under moon. Seeds she'd sown now stretched leaves broad, roots deep. Like herself. Yet unease lingered. Walton's glare burned in memory. Harrow's smirk etched sharp. They had not yielded, only paused. Men who wielded coin and law did not forgive humiliation. Clara folded letter and contract together, hid them beneath her mattress. Proof alone would not stop blood. Wind rustled eaves. Coyotes yipped far. Hank moved through house, checking shutters, rifle close. Pedro snored in bunkhouse. The night stretched heavy. Clara whispered to the darkness, "I will not run." But even as she said it, she knew Walton's next strike would not wait for judge. It would come by torch or steel, before truth could bind him. Clara May pressed the forged contract under her pillow, heart pounding, knowing Walton would not let law decide when his gun could. Sleep came in snatches. Each creak of timber set her upright, breath tight. Dawn at last broke pale, laying silver on garden leaves. She carried water, poured over beans standing strong after storm. Their roots clung stubborn in soil example enough. Hank saddled his gelding, Pedro sharpening a blade on stone. No words passed, only nods. Silence itself had turned weapon, all waiting for Walton's strike. By midday, Copper Hollow buzzed with rumor. Walton drank at Silver Spur, boasting Clara would soon beg on knees. Harrow counted coins behind shuttered windows. Sheriff warned Hank, "Law's slow. Watch your fences." That night, the strike came. Torches flared against sky, orange teeth biting dark. Riders thundered the yard, 6, no, more. Clara froze at window, knuckles white. Hank pushed rifle into her hands. "Stay close." Walton's voice bellowed through smoke. "Sign or burn, Carter. Land or ash." Hank strode onto porch, broad against firelight. "You'll not touch what's mine." Shots cracked. Wood splintered. Pedro answered, revolver flashing. Horses screamed. Flames licked corral rails. Clara's heart roared. She crouched, rifle tight, smoke choking. Then she saw Walton himself, torch in one hand, pistol in other, striding toward the house. Her blood iced. He would burn them out. She surged to doorway, rifle shaking. Hank shouted, "Clara!" But she leveled barrel. Walton sneered through smoke. "Still playing house, fat girl? You'll watch it burn." Her hands trembled, yet her voice rang. "This house is mine." She fired. The shot split night, torch falling from his grasp. Walton staggered, curse torn, pistol clattering into dirt. His men faltered, cries breaking. Pedro whooped, shots chasing them. Riders wheeled, fleeing into dark, leaving dust and smoke. Walton lay gasping, arm grazed, pride gutted. Sheriff's lanterns soon bobbed on horizon, townsmen riding fast. They bound Walton, dragging him toward jail. Clara sagged against doorframe, rifle sliding from her grasp. Hank caught her, steadying with iron grip. His storm-gray eyes burned not with anger but awe. "You held," he said low. Her knees shook, but her chin lifted. "I chose." The night faded to weary dawn. Smoke curled from charred rails, but house still stood. Garden leaves glittered with dew, untouched. Pedro leaned on shovel, grinning through soot. By afternoon, word spread. Walton gone from Copper Hollow, banished by judge's decree and town scorn. Harrow slunk silent, his schemes unraveling under eyes that no longer trusted. That evening, Clara carried her trunk to the porch. Hank watched, puzzled. She knelt, opened lid. Inside lay shoes from Boston scuffed leather, soles worn by cobblestone miles. She lifted them once, thumb brushing creases, then set them on porch boards. "These shoes will walk no further," she said. "I stay." Hank's breath caught. For a long moment he stood silent, then stepped closer. His hand, rough and scarred, lifted her chin. "Clara May, will you make this house yours?" Her eyes brimmed, but her voice held steady. "It already is." He drew her close, lips brushing hers, not hurried but sure. Behind them, mountains burned red with sunset, sky vast and unbroken. Pedro cleared throat, smiling as he turned away. Chickens clucked, cattle lowed, life carrying on. Clara leaned into Hank, heart steady. From a trunk left at depot, from a letter of shame, from soil planted with trembling hands, she had built a home. Under the western sky, Clara May knew she was no longer a cast-off bride, but the keeper of Double C's hearth and of Hank Carter's heart. The journey that began with humiliation at the depot ended in her choice to stay, to build, to love. She had turned rejection into belonging, soil into garden, fear into defiance. Walton's gunfire, Harrow's schemes, even the ghosts of Hank's past could not uproot what she planted with her own hands. At its heart, the tale showed that dignity is not given, it is claimed. One quiet evening, after the smoke of battle had cleared, Clara left her old shoes on the porch. Pedro, passing by, asked if she meant to throw them away. She smiled and said, "No, they are a reminder. These shoes carried me from shame, but here I no longer need them. Bare feet will do, because this ground is mine." Pedro told the story for years, always with a chuckle, but his eyes shone when he said, "That was the moment she became Mrs. Carter." And so the question remains, when the world rejects you, do you keep wandering for acceptance, or do you root yourself and make a place your own? If you felt moved by Clara May's courage, leave a comment with your thoughts. Subscribe for more stories of grit and grace, and share this tale so others can find strength in it too. Life's message here is clear. Even the weakest seed can grow strong if planted in the right soil.